My father chose a son-in-law from the imperial examination and had Xie Guanxian, the top-scoring scholar, marry me. At the time, I didn't know he already had a lover. Later, my father was wrongfully imprisoned and exiled to Lingnan. He brought back his childhood sweetheart, saying he wanted to marry her as his second wife. My mother-in-law scolded me, "You've been married for 3 years and haven't had any children. Are you still not going to allow my son to marry again?" Xie Guanxian taunted me, "You have no one to rely on now. Stop making trouble." He didn't know. I still have the letter of divorce he wrote in a fit of rage. In 7 days, I will go to Lingnan with my father. 1. The day my father was imprisoned, Xie Guanxian brought back his childhood sweetheart, whom he had just divorced. He came to my courtyard and told me indifferently, "In 7 days, I will marry Shitong as my second wife. I've already let her down too much. Even if you're reluctant, you have to endure it." That's when my father was imprisoned. He wasn't willing to wait even a single day. I looked up at him. His eyes were as cold as unmelted ice in early spring. Not a hint of affection could be seen. 3 years into our marriage, I still hadn't been able to impress him. I hastily turned my head away, hiding my sorrow. "Okay. Anyway, I'm leaving. It doesn't matter who he brings home." Xie Guanxian was a little surprised. His lips moved slightly, but he said nothing. He was always very frugal with his words to me. After he left, I opened my dressing box and found a piece of paper hidden under my jewelry. It was the divorce letter Xie Guanxian had written me 3 years ago. It had his signature and fingerprint on it. All I had to do was submit it to the authorities. And we could part ways. 2. 3 years ago, at the Qianglin banquet, I fell in love with Xie Guanxian, the top scholar. Within 3 days, he sent someone to propose marriage to me. I thought it was a match made in heaven. Until news of Song Shitong's marriage reached the capital. That day, Xie Guanxian was drunk. I made him a bowl of sobering soup and brought it to his study. He slumped over his desk, his eyes red, and called my name, Pei Jiaoyi. I thought he needed me, so I hurried over. But he picked up a paperweight and threw it to the ground. The ceramic paperweight landed heavily on the hem of my skirt. The shattered porcelain splattered everywhere. My heart skipped a beat with shock. The usually gentle Xie Guanxian gritted his teeth and said, "Pei Jiaoyi, it's all your fault. If you hadn't chosen me, if you hadn't had a father who was the Minister of Personnel, how could I have been forced to marry you? How could I have watched Shitong marry someone else?" There was a surge of hatred in his tone. So, what I thought was a harmonious marriage was all just a dream. A lump of air choked my chest. I couldn't let it out, couldn't let it out. I couldn't stop crying. Xie Guanxian staggered to his feet, picked up his pen, and scribbled a letter of divorce. He signed it, pressed his fingerprint. Then he tossed the light, fluttering paper towards me. He said, "I want to divorce you and go get Shitong." He was quite drunk. He even said such words. I suppressed my emotions and choked out, "You're drunk. Let's talk about it when you sober up." I lowered my head to pick up the paper, turned around, and walked out, closing the door behind me. Tears streamed down my cheeks like a broken dam. I returned to the courtyard alone. The night breeze was chilly, but it still couldn't sober me up. The next day, Xie Guanxian sobered up and treated me with the same gentleness and courtesy as before. He didn't mention Song Shitong again. Nor did he mention divorce. I tucked the paper away at the bottom of my dressing table. I was deceiving myself. Xie Guanxuan's beloved was already married. We had a long future together. 3. Song Shitong had put her trust in the wrong person. 2 months ago, Xie Guanxian personally wrote a letter to the magistrate of Songyang County, asking for her divorce. He took pity on her loneliness and desolation, and brought her to the capital to settle down. Now he was taking her into his mansion as his concubine. When Xie Guanxian brought Song Shitong to see me, I was counting my dowry. When I married Xie Guanxian, I brought 80 loads of dowry. Now I had to count every item, exchange it for banknotes, and go to the prison to arrange for it. Xie Guanxian stepped through the door. I put away the booklet and stood up. He said, Shitong wants to live in this courtyard. You should vacate it. His voice was cold and decisive. He left no room for negotiation. This courtyard was closest to Xie Guanchuan's residence. The courtyard was ablaze with flowers, including the crabapple trees he had planted himself. Under the wisteria trellis was the swing he had built for me on our wedding day. Song Shitong stood behind him. She timidly poked her head out. She revealed a pair of envious almond eyes. I looked up and, for the first time, refused him, no. The official residence is large enough, there's room for her. Why does it have to be here? She tugged at Xie Guanchuan's sleeve, a little annoyed. Xie Guanchuan's face darkened, because Shitong likes it. Because the crabapple trees here were originally planted for her. So, this place had been prepared for Song Shitong from the beginning. Song Shitong curled her lips at me. Her smile was gentle, like a weeping crabapple tree growing beside azure bricks and black tiles. I stared at her. Xie Guanxian shielded her behind him, his tone cold, move out today. Be good and don't embarrass anyone. I lowered my eyelashes and whispered, okay. My father was in prison. My greatest support was gone. Xie Guanxian, you no longer need to treat me with respect. 4. Before sunset, I moved to a secluded courtyard. I then took out the jewelry Xie Guanxian had given me and sold it at the treasure pavilion. I had once spent lavishly here. The landlady smiled as she saw me and ushered me into the side room. I laid out the items one by one on the table. The first was a pair of gold hairpins Xie Guanxian had given me when he came to propose marriage. He had just passed the imperial examination, was penniless, and used all his belongings to make me this small, exquisite pair of hairpins. The second item was a jade bracelet he bought for me with his salary, after he was promoted to director of the Ministry of Personnel. The third item was a hairpin he gave me as an apology after his drunken outburst. I loved wearing it as I ran towards him, its beads jingling. He would smile and embrace me, saying I was always free-spirited, unlike those demure women. The proprietress's eyes widened. These look like Mr. Xie bought them here a few years ago. Madam, are you serious about selling them? I said, yes. She examined the jewelry carefully and finally handed me a silver note. I wasn't good at bargaining, so I took the note and walked out. It was bustling outside. I heard Xie Guanchuan's voice, with a doting smile, do you like this hairpin? Song Shitong shyly replied, yes. Xie Guanxian bought it for her without hesitation. As he paid, he looked up at me, a hint of surprise in his eyes. He subconsciously glanced at my wrist. The jade bracelet I never took off was gone. Xie Guanxian put down the silver in his hand, grabbed my wrist, and stared into my eyes. Pei Jiaoyi, where's your bracelet? I turned my head, my eyes missing his, and lied, I'm not wearing it. He looked annoyed and his grip increased, causing me to frown in pain. Song Shitong hurriedly tugged at his sleeve, Guanxian. He then let go, as if waking from a dream. He smiled at her dreamily, I lost my composure just now. Amidst the mixed gazes of the crowd, I left alone. 5. The day before I left, my mother-in-law summoned me and told me to quickly prepare for Xie Guanxian and Song Shitong's wedding. I had other things to do, so I declined. She dropped her usual pleasant demeanor and scolded me, you've been married for 3 years, and haven't had any children yet, so why shouldn't you allow my son to remarry? I bowed my head and replied, of course I'd allow it. But I've been so busy with work lately that I don't have any free time. Xie Guanxian took a concubine without ever asking my permission. Why did he even have to make the necessary preparations? I didn't bother to argue, so I tidily shut her up. On the way back to the courtyard, I ran into Xie Guanxian again. He was wearing moon-white casual clothes, his eyes bright and his brows sparse. He was with Song Shitong, brewing tea in the backyard. She wore a red agate pearl hairpin on her head, and she poured him tea with a smile. As she bent down, her hairpin didn't even sway. The boiling hot tea poured into the teacup, and their eyes met in the misty white air, a tender embrace. He was a young official, often using the excuse of busy government affairs to spend entire days in his study. He had never done anything like this with me before. I paused but didn't stop. I hurried back to the courtyard, as if escaping. My thoughts were in a tangle. I couldn't even focus on the account book. That fleeting glimpse in my youth had haunted me for 3 years. Only now could I see it clearly. Xie Guanxuan's feelings for me were fake. His feelings for Song Shitong were genuine. I stared blankly at the account book. Until the maid, Zhu Xue, brought me the dowry book. "Madam, it's been sorted. Besides the portion I sold to help you, there are a few items missing." I suddenly looked up. Which ones? My parents had given me a huge dowry. I couldn't remember it all. She said, a pair of red agate and pearl hairpins, and a emerald phoenix coronet. Red agate and pearl hairpins. I'd seen them on Song Shitong's head. 6. I barged into Song Shitong's courtyard. She was trying on the phoenix coronet in front of a polished bronze mirror. Her wedding to Xie Guanxian was 6 days from now. It was too hasty. I thought Xie Guanxian had long intended to marry her, and had everything prepared in advance. Unexpectedly, she went to the storeroom, and took the kingfisher inlaid phoenix crown my mother had given me. I was furious. I took off her phoenix crown. I plucked out the intricate hairpins one by one and threw them to the ground. Some of them caught her long hair, which I pulled forcefully. She gasped in pain, her hair disheveled. She looked up at me and begged, "Please, let go. I'll take it off myself." I held my phoenix crown and looked at her coldly. Song Shitong fell from her chair, her hair disheveled. A few strands of hair were torn out and fell to the ground. She was in a state of disarray, looking at me with tearful eyes. "Madam, I'd have taken it if you'd told me. Why bother?" With a cold expression, I nudged her with my toe. "You took my things without asking, and you still say why." She buried her head, sobbing like a pear blossom in the rain. Footsteps suddenly rang behind me. Xie Guanxian strode in, pushed me aside, and pulled Song Shitong into his arms. I stumbled back 2 steps, instinctively holding onto the dressing table beside me to steady myself. The phoenix coronet slipped from my hand and fell heavily to the ground. The crimson gemstone was faintly cracked. He looked at me with a look of hatred and unfamiliarity. It was as if he had never known me before. "Pei Jiaoyi, why are you making things difficult for her?" My grievances were choking in my throat. In the end, he could only choke back a sob. "She took something my mother left me." His voice grew colder. "It's just a tiara. Let her wear it for a few days, what's wrong with that? You'd rather break it than lend it to Shitong. You've lost your support now. Stop making a fuss." I stood there. It was clearly spring, yet I felt a chill running through my body. Xie Guanxian knew how to hurt me best. The jewel on the phoenix coronet was cracked. Song Shitong buried herself in Xie Guanxuan's arms, frowning. She didn't like it anymore. He whispered to her, coaxing her, "I'll make you another one. It'll definitely be ready in time for the wedding." I bent down, picked up the broken phoenix coronet, and walked out alone. My heart felt like it was clenched, the pain making it hard to breathe. Just a few more days. When everything is settled, I'll leave. 7. I exchanged most of my dowry for banknotes and saved them. Xie Guanxian ignored me for a day before coming to see me. He said my father had been demoted to Tongpan, and would be leaving for Lingnan to take up his post in 3 days. My mother would go with him. As a daughter married out of wedlock, I could remain in the capital and continue to be an official's wife. Xie Guanxian leaned against the doorframe, his back lit. His elegant face was shrouded in darkness. Pei Jiaoyi, if you hadn't married me, you'd now be relegated to that swampy, rain-soaked place. I didn't comment. If I hadn't fallen in love with Xie Guanxian at first sight, I would have married him even if he were a member of the imperial family. A stable and smooth life would have made all the difference. Seeing my silence, he pulled a bracelet from his sleeve and placed it heavily on my dressing table. You cheated me. You sold it. He emphasized the word cheat, as if he was extremely dissatisfied. I whispered, if I don't want it anymore, I sold it. Is that so hard to understand? Anger etched itself into his brow. The housekeeper said you recently sold part of your dowry. He stared at me, his gaze burning a hole through me. You don't wear jewelry anymore, and you don't socialize with outsiders. What do you need all that money for? I met his gaze and said frankly, my father was exiled. The journey to Lingnan is long, and I need to take care of everything. It was the truth. Xie Guanxian didn't suspect anything. He then dumped the items I'd sold a few days ago onto my dressing table, one by one. The pearls and jade clashed against each other. His eyes were grim. You sold everything I gave you. Pei Jiaoyi, are you angry with me? I lowered my head in silence, straightening the beads on my hairpin and placing them in my dressing table. Take it to Lingnan and sell it. His hand wasn't that long. The lock clicked shut. I whispered, no. I wasn't angry with him. It's just that now, I no longer needed anything he gave me. Xie Guanchuan's voice was cold and mocking, my first wife should have been Shitong. You have no right to be jealous of her. I just replied woodenly, I know. His first wife should have been Song Shitong. He and Song Shitong were the true lovers. I've heard this many times. He didn't need to emphasize it again. He said nothing more, and a brief silence fell. I continued with my work. I took off my elaborate bun and braided my hair myself. After I went to Lingnan, no maids would do my makeup. Perhaps because I was so well behaved today. Xie Guanchuan's tone softened, leave this kind of thing to the maids. I curled my lips. Okay. 8. Xie Guanxian and Song Shitong's wedding was only 2 days away. Big red lanterns were hung under the eaves. Even in my remote courtyard there were some. Opening the window, I could see I saw it. The lantern was tied with red silk, and above it was Xie Guanchuan's handwriting. Mandarin ducks embrace each other for 1,000 years, and the zither and the qin live in harmony for 100 years. May we be a pair of flying geese, never parting for 100 years. When I married him 3 years ago, none of this existed. I looked out the window. Song Shitong appeared at the end of the corridor. She was very happy today, her eyes curved, and she walked towards me with a graceful gait. The hem of her red dress resembled a swimming koi. She paused at my door. She called me softly, Sister Pei, what kind of hairstyle should I wear on my wedding day? She was wearing her newly tailored wedding gown, but her hair wasn't tied up yet, making her look like a young woman. I said, this isn't your first marriage, yet you're asking me about such a trivial matter. Her expression froze, and her face paled. Her lips moved, but she seemed unable to speak. Xie Guanxian had wandered around the corridor. His gaze was stern, speaking for her. Pei Jiaoyi, you're a woman too. Why do you have to use the past to provoke her? Shitong wanted to ease relations with you, so she told me she was coming to ask you in person. Wasn't she trying to provoke me too? Xie Guanxian couldn't see. He only had eyes for her. I stood at the threshold, glaring down at her. You should wear your hair the same way you did when you got married. Okay, I've told you. You can go back now. Her eyes reddened and she took 2 steps back. Fragile and powerless, I fell into Xie Guanchuan's arms. Xie Guanxian frowned. Threatening me. Pei Jiaoyi, you've committed the 7 grounds for divorce. I could just write a divorce letter and end all ties with you. I looked at his face. Bitterness welled up in my heart. I stiffly pulled the corners of my lips together, then suddenly burst into tears. No need. Xie Guanxian, I already have the divorce letter. He scoffed, no need. If the wedding wasn't so imminent, I would have written it to you right away. He was used to speaking harshly to me. Anything became easy for him to say. I leaned against the doorframe. Silently. I watched him leave with Song Shitong. Song Shitong snuggled in his arms, smiling at him. The lanterns hanging in the corridor cast a red glow on their profiles. A love story. I took a deep breath, calmed myself, and said to the maid beside me, prepare the carriage. Tomorrow, I'm going to the Ministry of Rights. I returned to my room. I took the divorce letter from my dressing box. I signed my name with a pen. I placed my fingerprint. All in one go. The divorce procedure went smoothly. We both had signatures and fingerprints. Now that the Pei family was in decline, it seemed only natural for Xie Guanxian to disown me. The Ministry of Rights didn't ask any further questions. I returned my household registration to the Pei family. It was almost noon when I finished everything and returned home. The wedding banquet was tomorrow. Everyone in the mansion was busy. No one paid any attention to me. I returned to my room and sorted out the things I needed to take with me. There were 2 mahogany boxes. I had someone send them out of the mansion first. The banknotes were thin, so I could carry them with me. I've sent a letter to my parents. Tomorrow morning, we'll be leaving. The house has been tidied to the T, leaving no trace of my presence. At nightfall, Xie Guanchuan's maid brought me a set of gorgeous clothes. She bowed her head and said, "This is what the master asked me to bring to you, madam. This is the fabric he personally selected 2 months ago. You can wear it for the ceremony tomorrow." The material was the finest silk, gleaming brilliantly in the crimson candlelight. The maid inside took it. But she didn't leave. Standing at the bottom of the stairs. "The master asked me to bring a message to you, madam. What he said yesterday was just an angry remark. Please don't take it to heart." His words were irreversible. The sting was still there. I was silent for a moment, then nodded, indicating I'd heard. She raised her eyes cautiously and asked softly, "Is there anything you'd like to say to the master?" The night breeze was chilly. The wind made my eyes dry. I said slowly, "No more. You should return home early to report." She quickly withdrew. That night, I slept restlessly. Servants and maids came and went at the door. The lights burned brightly all night. Xie Guanxian was getting married. The servants would receive generous rewards. Everyone was happy, and they worked day and night without feeling tired. 10. I got up early. At dawn, I changed into inconspicuous plain clothes and went out with a veil. The housekeeper recognized me and casually asked, "Madam Pei, what are you doing out? The wedding banquet will begin in an hour." Song Shitong was also going to be his wife. To distinguish her, he called me by my last name. I just smiled and said, "Going to the city gate to see my parents off." No need to tell the master. He bowed and said, "Yes." I got in the carriage and headed for the city gate. The carriages rumbled forward. The spectators headed toward the Xie residence, the opposite direction from me. I lowered the curtain and stared blankly at my toes. 3 years ago, I married Xie Guanxian and lived a life of mutual respect. I was naive then. I thought Song Shitong was married, and he married me, and that this was the only way life would go on. I thought I could win his heart just by being nice to him. Until a year ago, he received another letter from Song Shitong. After marrying me, he rose rapidly in the officialdom, rising a rank almost every year. I loved him, and my father supported him. His life was smooth, his future bright, even more ambitious than when he passed the imperial examination. But Song Shitong's life after marriage was not easy. Her husband favored his concubine over his wife, and her life was difficult. Only 19 years old, she was exhausted and gradually became thinner. She could hardly help but complain to her childhood sweetheart. The ink on the letter was almost stained by her tears. She should have married Xie Guanxian. They should have been a young couple. Xie Guanxian felt guilty about her and resented me. From then on, he secretly supported her and distanced himself from me. I thought. I woke up too late. 11. An hour later, I boarded a carriage bound for Lingnan. My parents knew I had divorced Xie Guanxian. They just sighed. They lamented that they hadn't chosen the right person, causing me to suffer in vain. I pursed my lips, afraid to speak. I was foolish. I made one mistake after another. The journey to Lingnan was long. But fortunately, I had money. If I went by water, I could rent a larger boat, or I could arrange to hire a few fast horses at the post station. It was more than half a month before I arrived at the official residence in Lingnan. I thought I wouldn't be used to it. But it was only a few days of initial illness due to the unfamiliar climate, but I eventually adapted. Anyang planted fruits and vegetables in the yard. The climate here is hot and humid, and everything grows quickly. Dad's salary became minimal. I saved the money I brought with me for emergencies. Then I learned weaving and sewing from Anyang. There's no soft silk or glittering jewelry here. But I lived comfortably and happily. I could eat fruits and see scenery not found in the capital. I could eat 300 lychees a day and live in Lingnan forever. I gradually forgot the past. I forgot the feelings I had when I was with Xie Guanxian. The days when we treated each other with respect, the rare days of love. The long nights when Xie Guanxian ignored me, the long nights spent by the lonely lamp. It flowed by like water. Things faded like a dream, leaving no trace. After returning from the wedding banquet for the son of my father's colleague, my mother took my hand, frowned, and asked, "I saw you were lost in thought just now. Were you thinking about that person?" I was stunned, then answered frankly, "I was wondering how the white-cut chicken at the banquet was prepared. It's different from what I made before." She chuckled. "I'll have your father ask tomorrow." I hugged my mother's arm, acting coquettishly. We were all talking and laughing. 12. Before the wedding banquet began, Xie Guanxian paused for a moment at Pei Zhaoi's door. He wanted to say that he hadn't meant to say the divorce. He didn't mean to. He simply wanted to tell her that he was the only one she had now. He didn't know when it started. He had become accustomed to speaking harshly to Pei Zhaoi. Xie Guanxian actually felt a little regretful. He regretted speaking harshly to her, regretted always hurting her. There was no movement in the room. He asked the housekeeper, "Where's the madam?" The housekeeper, mistaking him for Song Shitong, replied, "The madam is getting dressed." He said, "Good." Yesterday, Xie Guanxian had delivered a new dress for Pei Zhaoi. He had chosen the fabric and had it made 2 months ago. Whenever he saw something nice, he always wanted to give it to Pei Zhaoi. The lake blue color complemented her. He imagined how the dress would look on her. The corners of his lips curled up unconsciously. But until the wedding banquet began, he hadn't seen Pei Zhaoi. His eyelids twitched, and he asked the housekeeper again, "Where's the madam?" The housekeeper lowered his head in panic. "Is that Madam Pei?" Madam Pei went to the city gate this morning to see Lord Pei off. The auspicious time had arrived. Xie Guanxian paid no attention to Song Shitong behind him. He rushed to the villa and pushed the door open. The room was spotlessly clean. It was as if Pei Jiaoyi had never lived there. Only the new, lake blue dress remained in the room. No sign of it having been moved. Xie Guanxuan's heart emptied, followed by a sharp pain in his heart. He felt as if he were about to lose Pei Jiaoyi. 13. Xie Guanxian went to the stables, fetched a fast horse, and rushed out the door amid the astonished gazes of the guests. Song Shitong followed him, clutching the hem of her wedding dress, stumbling and chasing after him, tears streaming down her face. The wind roared loudly in his ears. He didn't hear. She tripped over the threshold and was reluctantly helped back by a maid. Xie Guanxian, still in his wedding attire, whipped his horse and chased after her desperately. The wind blew bloodshot from his eyes. He watched helplessly as a simple carriage drove out of the city gate. He wanted to follow but was stopped. Xie Guanxian was a Beijing official. No one could leave without an imperial decree. He watched helplessly as the carriage rode farther and farther, disappearing from his sight. Xie Guanxuan's strength drained from his body, and he fell from the horse. Lingnan and the capital were thousands of miles apart. From now on, they might never see each other again. He buried his face in his hands. Tears streamed through his fingers. His sobs were painful. Everyone was startled. The gatekeeper hurriedly helped him up. Master Xie, what happened? He was speechless. Behind him, above the Xie mansion, fireworks prepared a day in advance exploded in the blue sky. This should have been his wedding day. But Pei Jiaoyi was gone. He thought nothing more. It turned out that Song Shitong was just a youthful obsession. He had always believed that he had been forced to marry Pei Jiaoyi out of power. I always thought he should hate her, distance himself from her, and make amends to Song Shitong. They spent every day together. He dared not say he had never been moved. Only today did Xie Guanxian see clearly. Losing Pei Jiaoyi. That was the most heartbreaking pain. 14. I thought I would stay in Lingnan for a long time. But 2 years later, my father was rescued by my uncle. My uncle wrote to persuade him. His injustice had not yet been cleared, but because of his past achievements and his reputation in Lingnan for diligence and love for the people, His Majesty summoned him back to the capital. From now on, be careful with your words and actions and stop talking too much. It wasn't just my uncle who rescued my father, but also Xie Guanxian. When Xie Guanxian was mentioned, my father's expression was calm, his eyebrows unmoved. To him, my father was not only his former father-in-law, but also his mentor. He cared about my father's affairs. It seemed only natural. At the beginning of spring, I returned to the capital with my parents. The official residence we had been living in was no longer habitable. My father took us to live in an old house on the outskirts of the city. When Xie Guanxian came to see me, the first spring rain had fallen on the outskirts of the city. He held an oil paper umbrella and paused at the door. The raindrops were fine and dense, falling between us. It felt like a layer of fog. I remembered the first time we met. He stood tall and majestic in the crowd. He seemed shrouded in mist, like a pearl or jade. But now he has aged and become thinner, his aura calm, as still as an ancient well. When I see him, my heart no longer beats as fast as it used to. I stood under the eaves, hands tucked into my sleeves, and lowered my brows to ask him, Master Xie, what are you doing here? His voice was dry, Jiaoyi. I don't want to divorce you. That was just a tirade. I was mad at you for selling the things I gave you. I looked him in the eye and whispered, Xie Guanxian. You've said that twice. The first time, I deceived myself and hid the letter of divorce. The second time, I finally made up my mind and left Xie Guanxian. A flicker of surprise and bewilderment crossed his brows. He didn't seem to remember. After all, he was drunk at the time. And it had been 5 years since that incident. I calmly repeated the story to him, 5 years ago, you were drunk. You said it was all my fault, that you had to watch Song Shitong marry someone else. That's when you wrote me the divorce letter. 2 years ago, I divorced you, based on that piece of paper. We have nothing to do with each other now. If you need to discuss matters with my father, I can pass on a message for you. His face suddenly turned extremely pale. His lips moved and he managed a few words, his voice very soft. I'm here to see you, Joey. Then there's nothing more to say. I stepped back and closed the door, isolating everything from outside. The servant said. Xie Guanxian didn't leave. He stood there all night. Until Song Shitong came looking for him. 15. On the third day after my return to Beijing, I happened to catch the flower festival. I went out to enjoy the flowers with the wives of my father's colleagues. Song Shitong was there too. She didn't look happy. Wearing ordinary jewelry, she sat alone. No one spoke to her. Xie Guanxian had brought her back with such fanfare that many people knew about it. She had been involved with a married man. Her past was no secret. Most people disliked her, mocking her and saying she had driven me away. In a lively occasion like this, she could only sit in the corner, feeling the cold shoulder. I ignored her, lowering my head, still cutting the 5-colored paper in my hand. Madam Yi whispered in my ear. She went from being the wife of a small county clerk to the wife of a doctor in the Ministry of Personnel. What could she not be satisfied with? I thought about it. Perhaps that's not what she wants. I raised my hand and handed Madam Yi a pair of small silver scissors. She sat down and cut the 5-colored paper with me. We then glued the paper to flower branches as a sacrifice to the flower god, praying for the flowers to bloom. Madam Yi couldn't sit still. She cut for a moment before going back to catch butterflies. Song Shitong walked over to me. Her voice was soft, yet resentful. Pei Jiaoyi, it's all your fault. I was a little confused. Huh? Blame me again? Although I'm still young and my spine is strong, I can't bear so much blame. She said, if you hadn't wanted to marry Xie Guanxian, I could have married him 5 years ago. I wouldn't have suffered so much. He wouldn't have had anyone else in his heart. We wouldn't have reached the point where we'd grown tired of each other. I rubbed my forehead. My head ached. Then why don't you blame him? She was stunned. I said, even if he didn't marry me, he would have married someone else. He was only 22 when he became a 5th-rank official in the Ministry of Personnel. That's a position many people strive for half their lives to reach. The top scholar who passed the imperial examination in the same year as him is now still inferior to him. If he wanted to marry you, no one could stop him. It's just that he can't let go of all this. You should be thankful he married me. I'm a soft persimmon. If it were anyone else, he would have dealt with you and him as soon as you wrote your first letter to Xie Guanxian. In fact, when Xie Guanxian helped her divorce, I was happy for her. Happy that she was out of this fire. Then I hated her. She was just as confused as I was before. I finished slowly. I dropped the scissors and prepared to leave. Her eyes were red. She stood alone outside the flowers, tears streaming uncontrollably. 16. I had a blast. When I returned home at dusk, my mother told me that several families had sent matchmakers, hoping to arrange a marriage. I said, I don't want to marry again. I'd already been through that once. There's nothing good about getting married, it only adds to the burdens. There's the care of the harem, the support of the husband, and the worry of having children. If you don't choose the right person, you'll have to endure even more hardships. Being alone is more peaceful and comfortable. My mother respected my opinion and politely declined all the matchmakers. I stayed home, helping my mother with household chores and occasionally going out with others. Life was blissful. Xie Guanxian often sent me gifts. Sometimes they were rare little things. Sometimes they were long letters of pleas for love. I returned them unopened. One ordinary night, Song Shitong came to see me. She had lost weight and looked haggard. The wind was chilly outside, so I let her in first. She cried and apologized to me. I was terribly wrong. I was the one who wronged you. I looked at her calmly and handed her a handkerchief to wipe her tears. She said. Xie Guanxian only supported her and rarely saw her. She was in the mansion, with no one to talk to, and she felt depressed every day. Back then, it was Xie Guanxian who didn't keep his promise to marry her. Now, it was Xie Guanxian who ignored her. She sobbed, I hate him. I held my chin and listened, unsure how to interpret their love-hate relationship. Just don't hate me. Song Shitong seemed to have not confided in anyone in a long time. She talked to me for a long time, listening to herself until I felt drowsy. Finally, she asked me, can you forgive me? It was me who was jealous of you and stole your things. I've made you sad. I know I was wrong. I thought about it and said, that's fine. I'll forgive you when you've repaired my Phoenix Corona. 17. 6 months later. Song Shitong returned my Phoenix Corona. The shattered ruby had been replaced with a finer one. She had glued the tiny rice beads on one by one with her own hands. The scratches had disappeared. That was good. At least during the 6 months it took to repair the Phoenix Corona, she wasn't bored anymore, no longer dwelling on whether Xie Guanxian loved her or not. During this time, 2 major events also occurred. First, my father was cleared of his grievances and reinstated. Second, Xie Guanxian was convicted of political strife and exiled to Lingnan. I wasn't surprised. He had risen steadily since entering the officialdom, his career had been incredibly smooth. It was inevitable that he was still somewhat naive and lacked caution, making him prone to missteps. Before leaving, he came to see me again. Just like at the beginning. I stood on the high steps of the Shangshu's official residence and watched him. He stood at the bottom, his posture stiff. When he looked at me, he could only look up. I'm going to Lingnan, perhaps for many years. Does this count as atonement? His voice was hoarse. I didn't like it. I said no. Your own carelessness has led you to this point, it has nothing to do with me. I turned and left. Song Shitong was also going to Lingnan with Xie Guanxian. She had no friends in the capital. I was the only one to see her off. She sat in the simple carriage, raised the curtain, and looked at me, the light in her eyes dim. I knew what she was worried about. Lingnan had always been rumored to be a place of miasma, rain, and smoke. After this trip, I didn't know if she would ever return. I said, don't worry, Lingnan is wonderful. It's just a bit far. But you can spend Xie Guanxuan's money and get a bigger carriage to make your stay more comfortable. Lingnan has a lot of delicious fruits and vegetables, many of which are not available in the capital. She curled her lips and smiled. Gentle and bright. Just like the first time I met her. Another tear fell from the corner of her eye. Thank you, Joey. 18. I was in the capital, studying and learning. I read many books of sages and learned acupuncture and woodblock New Year paintings. My father didn't stay in the position of Shangshu forever. He later sought an external post. He took me to Linnan Prefecture and Jiangling Prefecture. We saw the prosperity of the world. I will never indulge in such trivial matters again. Xie Guanxian also made some achievements in Lingnan. But Northwest One in the court spoke up for him. He was later transferred to many places, and never returned to the capital. The time he came to see me before leaving Beijing was our last meeting. A few years later, I received a letter from Song Shitong. She had been married to Xie Guanxian for 10 years, and had finally decided to divorce. She was different from me. She had no one to rely on, only Xie Guanxian. 3 years ago, she had been transferred to Chengdu Prefecture with Xie Guanxian. She had always been intelligent and quickly learned to weave shoe brocade. With a skill to earn a living, she could leave Xie Guanxian and become self-reliant. I thought, this is great. There are still many years left in life. We can all live for ourselves again.